taking a look at Mark, the Gospel of Mark. No surprise there. But what I thought we'd do first of all is just sort of take an overview of Mark and an introduction to Mark. We will be looking at verses of Scripture as well, so it's not just going to be me wittering on about when it was written and all that. But I think it's just helpful to have an overview of the Gospel of Mark, so that and what this rather nice little handout will do is you can use it in a number of different ways. As you see, there are lots of detail in it if you want to go through it in great detail, but there's also just a wider sort of a wider framework there, which will just help you in your personal studies as well when you come to the Gospel of Mark. Just something that will sort of aid you as you go through it. It's not all my own work, I have to say. Partially based on Wesley's introduction to the Gospel of Mark, partially based on David Pawson's overview. So I've kind of put the two together, and a bit of my own mad ramblings as well. So, but hopefully will be a blessing and will help you as you study the Gospel of Mark. So, Gospel of Mark. We'll come to the sheet in a moment. We'll do some work from that. But the Gospel of Mark, written between 55 and 65 AD, I reckon, for those who know. And it's what's known as one of the synoptic Gospels. There's three synoptic Gospels: Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Synoptic is made of two Greek words. Syn, S-Y-N, means together, and optic, I'm sure you can guess, it's to do with the eyes, to do with seeing or viewing. And so what it's saying is that the first three Gospels are viewing the same kind of events, really. They're also saying the same thing together. When you first become a Christian, you read the Bible and you read the Gospel of Mark, you might have found this. So you read the Gospel of Matthew and you think, oh, that was great. And then you move on to Mark and you start reading and think, hang on, I just read this. And there's a sense in which it repeats itself. And Luke again. Although there are differences, of course, between those Gospels, but what you're doing is getting a different view of more or less the same events. Whereas the Gospel of John's writing more on his own. It's a different kind of approach, really, that John takes. And so Mark is one of the synoptic Gospels. It's even though it comes second in your New Testament, it's actually the oldest of the Gospels. And you'll find that Matthew, when he writes, and Luke particularly, because Luke's not writing from an eyewitness account. Luke is gathering information from all different people about Jesus, and he's sort of collating that information together. But they take a lot of their information from Mark. So they're using Mark as a reference for that, because it's the oldest source, of course. So that's just a little bit there about the Gospel of Mark as a sort of by way of an introduction. There's a real simplicity about Mark, but there's a sort of power, I think, in that simplicity. If you just go to chapter 1 and verse 1 there, I just love the way he just starts like in such a simple way, and it says the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. So straight away he just laid out his stall and said who Jesus is, and there's no fuss, there's no attempt to try and be flowery in the language, but he just states very, very important and very powerful phrases like that. So that's how it starts off. Very simple gospel, and it is a gospel. That's worth remembering. He's trying to reach unbelievers with these words, as much as it's a blessing to the church and to us, it helps us understand all about Jesus and about certain events that are going to take place in the future, and it teaches us all about the crucifixion and the resurrection. He is also writing to non-Christians. It's a gospel message, really, that he's putting forth. He's presenting Jesus Christ. Excuse me. but it's done in such a simple and powerful way. Okay, if you have a look at your sheet here, you'll see just below where it says the Gospel according to Mark, I've written three-phase chronological structure. That means that as you read through the Gospel of Mark, you'll find that it sort of breaks down into three main phases, and they're chronological. In other words, they're not skipping back in time or anything like that. It's as it happens. And the first one is I've labelled up as popularity, the second one as opposition, and the third one as discipleship of the 12. So the popularity I'm talking about is the popularity of the Lord Jesus. So when he starts his ministry, he's very popular. Thousands get healed. Everyone's talking about Jesus. So they have there's this popular stage as we read through Mark, and then, well, frankly, it doesn't last too long. When I say three phases, you might be thinking, oh yeah, so maybe like let's say we've got say five chapters devoted to the kind of popularity phase, 5 chapters under the opposition phase, and maybe 6 chapters under the discipleship phase. But it isn't like that at all. What we find is that in the popularity of Jesus, where if you look on your sheet, it says Christ actions approved. This is where he receives approval for what he's doing. Starts really at chapter 1 verse 21, but it only goes on really as far as verse 45. So it's quite a short-lived moment of popularity that Jesus is enjoying, and then fairly quickly it changes to opposition. And again, the opposition starts really at the beginning of chapter 2 and verse 1. And you'll see as you look through the sheet there, wherever there's a change in the chapter, I've put that in bold so you can see whereabouts it's up to. If you're looking through the sheet and you think, all right, whereabouts is this up to now? The chapter should be in bold. So you might have to just look around a little bit, but you'll find it in bold. And there's a number of subsections as well as you go through, just putting it into where there's a change of scenery or something like that. So for example, we've got after phase 2, there's a subheading, actions criticised by Christ's enemies, and then underneath that you can see chapter 2, and then if you come down there's a subheading, Jesus withdraws. That's when he withdrew to the sea, gets in the boat and everything. And so that's how it works. There's main headings and there's subsections. It just should help as you go through it. So yeah, well, once we get to phase 2 where he receives opposition, it's interesting and it's typical that the opposition first of all comes from the religious people. So whenever you're doing anything for the gospel, whether it's preaching the gospel or whether it's just witnessing to people or just talking, saying, yeah, I'm a Christian, it doesn't take very long for religious people to come along and these are nominal Christians, people who say they're Christians. It's the devil does use them to stop the gospel, to shut it down, to cause opposition. And it's no different. If it wasn't any different for Jesus, then we shouldn't expect it to be any different for us either. And perhaps we'll just have a look at that actually. So the opposition starts really in chapter 2. Let's have a look at chapter 2 and verse 5. Okay, so this is talking about the the man who was sick of who had the palsy, and do you remember when they uncovered the roof and they lowered him down, and so that's what's taking place here. And then verse 5 says this: when Jesus saw their faith, he said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, thy sins be forgiven thee. But there were certain of the scribes sitting there and reasoning in their hearts, "Why doth this man thus speak blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God only?" And immediately when Jesus perceived in his spirit that they so reasoned within themselves, he said unto them, "Why reason ye these things in your hearts? Whether is it easier to say to the sick of the palsy, Thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, Arise and take up thy bed and walk? But that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins, he saith to the sick of the palsy, I say unto thee, Arise and take up thy bed and go thy way." So Jesus heals him, but this is the first moment that he has this opposition from the religious people of the day. And so another interesting thing, of course, about this passage is he uses his title of himself, the Son of Man, and also straight away the Pharisees have realised that only God can forgive sins. If he's saying that he's forgiven people's sins, then he's declaring himself to be God. That's why they're so keen on stoning him and charging him with blasphemy, because they understand all the way through, hang on, he's claiming something more than being just a teacher, or more than just a prophet. He's actually claiming to be God himself. That's why they're so angry with him all the time and trying to catch him out. And so here it is, and it's a slight opposition at first, isn't it? Or they're questioning him, what he's saying, and of course, as we'll see as it goes through, the opposition gets worse and worse. All right, so again we have this opposition phase, and Mark is like a few of the other Gospels. There's sort of like little snapshots happening here and there, this event and that event and so on. But now when we get to chapter 2 and chapter 2 and verse, where would it be? Yeah, where he calls the let's see, is it chapter 3? Yeah, sorry, it's chapter 3. We get to chapter 3 and verse 13. Where he starts to call aside the apostles. And I'll just read that to you. Chapter 3 verse 13. "And he goeth up into a mountain, and calleth unto him whom he would, and they came unto him, and he ordained 12 that they should be with him, and that he might send them forth to preach, and to have power to heal sicknesses, and to cast out devils." And then we get the names of the 12. And Simon he surnamed Peter, and James the son of Zebedee, and John the brother of James, and he surnamed them Boanerges, which is the sons of thunder, and Andrew and Philip and Bartholomew, and Matthew and Thomas, and James the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, and Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, which also betrayed him, and they went into a house. Okay, so this phase of discipleship in chapter 3 here, again the attention shifts now to his relationship with his disciples. Now there's still healings going on, there's still casting out demons and so on, but now the focus of attention is just slightly different, just more on discipleship and his relationship with those 12. He's still got other followers, other disciples that are following him, but then he has this sort of inner core of 12 who he's explaining things to, and we're kind of privy to that, aren't we? We're kind of like a fly on the wall, kind of hearing his discussion with his disciples.